respiratory system and the function of the particular respiratory system is under the veterinary anatomy, physiology and biochemistry classes, and will continue further. So, the respiratory system as such, we need to compare the anatomy and physiology of the respiratory system of different animals with that of the domestic animals. So gas exchange in animals, so the fish, mammals and everything, there will be a change. So the cellular respiration requires oxygen and produces carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is exchanged out. And gas exchange provides a means of the supplying up of organism with oxygen and removing the unwanted carbon dioxide. So the source of oxygen, about air, 21% of the oxygen is present and thinner at higher altitude. So as you go up and up, the oxygen percentage is going to be reduced. In the earth level it is 21%. And the water amount of oxygen varies but always much less than that of the air, and the normal mammal cannot respirate in the water. However, the animals, vertebrate animals which live in the water can also respirate. And gas exchange surfaces. So it is exchange happens always with the mechanism of diffusion, which is greater than the surface area, which is very large. Then the distance traveled is short. Then the concentration gradient is very high. Gas exchange also requires the moist surface, wherein which the oxygen and carbon dioxide must be dissolved in water to diffuse across the membrane in the aquatic animal. Whereas it will be organized and operates in a way that maintains favorable concentration gradient for the diffusion of both gases. So a circulatory system is always collaborated with that of the respiratory system. Then the structure of the gas exchange surface, so the size of the organism, where it lives, water or the land, or metabolite demand of the oxygen to the different tissues. So here are some different type of the animal, and the exchange surface will be like that. Whereas the amphibians, there will be a gills which contains like this, and internal gill, especially in the case of the arthropods. The specialized lungs will be present in the mammals, and the trachea is present in the animals like the insects like grasshoppers. Water as exchange medium, no problem. Keeping the cell membranes, the gas exchange surface is moist, but oxygen concentration is very low, especially in warmer and saltier water. So, gas exchange system must be very efficient to get more and more oxygen for respiration. Hence, the fish is developed as the gills because it takes the water as an operculum in the flap. Operculum is closed, and fish ventilates gill alternatively by opening and closing the mouth and operculum. So this is the water flows in the mouth and the oxygen is absorbed through the gills. Whereas each made up of the bony gills like this, a specialized gill arches are present, and the filamentous type of the structure is present, and water flow in between this will make the oxygen to be absorbed more and more into the circulation. So the gill, it's an interesting phenomenon that the gill filaments have folds called as the lamellae. These are the lamellae. Then they contain a network of the capillaries, and blood flows to the gas capillaries in opposite direction to that of the water. Hence, more and more water flows, then oxygenated blood will be there. Whereas the exchange of the fish mechanism the thin walled and very high blood supply to the carbon dioxide and carry away oxygen as usual mechanisms, and gills are the moist, whereas the lungs of any animal is not moist. So this is the way how the water flows and the oxygen is taken in a counter current flow. So blood will be flowing in this direction, water will be flowing in this opposite direction, and the exchange mechanism takes place. So this is the thing. The erythrocytes, etc., are there which get saturated over the oxygen. And counter current flow is a very common mechanism in case of the fish. So the counter current flow makes the saturation of the blood with that of the oxygen in the increasing directions. Blood flow 20-25%, etc. Water flow is in the reverse direction. So this happens in case of most of the fish, etc. But we are connected with the mammals, birds, etc. So the gas exchange surface is folded into body cavity or reduce water loss, and warm-blooded animals do have the lungs as one of the most important tissue, and the lungs are the basic organs which are very much required for the respiration, which are connected through trachea to the mouth or the nose. So air in and air out happens in between the intercostal muscles, and the diaphragm is going to contract and relax when there is inhale and exhale of the air. So mammalian lung is having the trachea, then bronchi, then it is divided into different bronchioles, and ultimately it is consisting of the alveoli. And healthy lungs, for example, this may be a smoker lungs. Healthy lung is always a pink organ embedded with the heart. And usually in case of cattle, so the respiratory tract starts with the nose, then it is epiglottis, then the trachea, and both type of the multilobular lungs are present. So the normal lungs look like this, a pinkish organ, whereas the pleura is the most outer coat, and pleural effusions are present in the abnormal animal. Usually the trachea consists of epiglottis or the windpipe and ultimately the bronchiole. Usually this is left lung and right lung, and the branch is called as the bronchiole, and this is the called as the windpipe or trachea. Then alveoli are surrounded by both arteries and venules. Here you can see that the arteries are red in color, whereas the veins are blue in color. So the respiratory system in a dog, same thing. The soft palate, then cavities, nasal cavity, then lungs are being connected through the trachea, and the diaphragm is the one which is making the dog to respirate in a proper manner. So the thoracic cavity is containing bilobar lungs, which is connected with that of the trachea to the mouth. And very similarly, in case of cats, the tongue, larynx, then trachea, ultimately the lungs are there, which are separated from the abdominal cavity with that of the diaphragm, and the cranial lobe, middle lobe, and caudal lobe of the lungs are present in case of cats. So the different animals do contain different type of the lungs. For example, snakes, then also the birds, the aquatic animals, the horses, and also the other domestic animals like the rats, etc., do contain the lung, including the human beings, as a basic organ of respiration. And there is a relationship between the heart and lungs always, and blood flow to the lung takes place by the arteries. They are going to supply some blood, which is going to be pumped to the pulmonary arteries here. Then it will be going to the lungs and return by the oxygenated blood from the pulmonary vein. And deoxygenated blood will always flow inside the lung, and oxygenated blood will come into the lungs. Then the pulmonary artery is the one which is an exceptional artery which always carry the impure blood, whereas all the other arteries in the body do always carry the pure blood or oxygenated blood. So there will be a connective tissue. Alveolar sacs will be there in most of the lungs as a common structure. Alveolar duct, mucous gland, mucosal lining, then pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein, alveolar, then also the atrium will be present, and capillary beds are present in case of the lungs. And mammalian lungs do always have the structure which is most important one is the alveoli, and they are having lined with the moisture or mucus and surrounded by capillary network. Here the capillary network will be there, and the blood flow will be pulmonary artery, and pulmonary veins are going to supply the lungs with that of the from the heart, and the alveoli always do contain pulmonary artery supplied with that of the pure blood, and the pulmonary veins do contain oxygenated blood when compared to the other organs, which is opposite in direction. So this is the carbon dioxide and the oxygen exchange mechanism. Usually, the inhaled air contains about 21% of the oxygen, and it is containing 0.04% of the carbon dioxide, whereas the blood low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide, which enters the lungs. So, the oxygen in the lung air dissolved in moist lining, then diffuses into the blood, whereas the carbon dioxide in the blood which diffuses moist lining, then diffuses into the lung air and exhaled out. Whereas compared to the inhaled air, exhaled air contains 17% oxygen, means 4% is absorbed, and see the exhaled air contains 4% carbon dioxide. So this is the important thing to remember. So it is 0.04%, whereas it is 4%, means more than 100 times high. And blood leaving will be high in oxygen and low in carbon dioxide. So this is the gas exchange in case of mammal. Blood in, usually lung contains carbon dioxide more and more, and it is exchanged between the oxygen in the alveolar air sac, and blood will get with oxygenated one. So what's a respiratory system then? So it's a organ of respiration. Apparatus ventilatory system is a biological system consisting of specific organs and structures used to gas exchange in case of human beings. And organ of respiratory system is the nose and nasal cavity, followed by pharynx, then larynx, trachea, then two bronchi, then bronchi. And also, apart from this one, two lungs are present in most of the domesticated animals. Usually, the nose and nasal cavity is a very common structure in most of the animals and also the mammals, including the human beings. And primary route of entry of air inside the lungs, and two cavities divided into septum, and anteriorly consist of a hyaline cartilage, upper part is considered, and the roof is formed by ethmoid bone, and the floor is formed from the roof of the mouth, then medial wall formed by the septum, lateral wall formed by the maxilla. So this is the structure of the upper respiratory tract infection. Then this is called as the tonsil, where in which whenever the animal or the human being is suffering from the respiratory tract infection, upper respiratory tract infection, this area get erythematted, then the opening up of the respiratory system, then the soft palate will be present, and this is the anterior nares, and the entire thing is called as the vestibule. Then there are bones called as the turbinate bones, middle turbinate, superior turbinate, and frontal sinus is present in case of the human beings, and the animals do also have the similar type of the sinus which are present. Then respiratory functions of the nose is first of the respiratory passage, and it makes the air warm for filtering and cleaning. The nose contains hairs which trap larger particles, and also the humidification. As air travels over the mucosa, it becomes saturated with water vapor. Then the pharynx is the first part of the throat that is behind the mouth, and it also makes the air to flow inside the lungs. So this is the human lungs, and the entry of this is called as the pharynx. Then epiglottis is the one which closes the trachea while swallowing some of the things, and this is the larynx opening, and the esophagus is above the trachea or larynx, and then it is opening into the pharynx. So the nasopharynx, then oropharynx and laryngopharynx are divisions of the pharynx depending upon the anatomical location. So the this is the structure: nasopharynx upper one, oropharynx middle one, then hypopharynx is the lower one, then larynx is the one which is always required for respiration, then the trachea and epiglottis are being closed by when the animal is respirating, and when it's swallowing something, then it is being closed. So the blood supply to the structures contains the mucous membrane lining, fibrous tissue, smooth muscle cell. It is a common thing in case of all the animals, including the human beings. Hence, we are going to compare with that of the human being. And nerve supply is the vagus nerve, is the one which supplies, and glossopharyngeal nerve. Then functions of the respiratory system is passageway of air and food, warming and humidifying. Then there are olfactory nerve endings are also there. So these are the one which do have the sense of smell and also hearing, then protection, then also the speech. So the larynx is also an organ in between the lungs or trachea and also the nase. So this is the larynx in which the cartilage, upper part of the cartilage, and vocal cords are the one which produce sounds, and subglottis or trachea and esophagus. These are all, esophagus is a tubular type of the structures, and vocal cords are required for the producing the sounds. And epiglottis is the one which closes the esophagus while respiration, and while engulfing something, it is going to close the trachea. So it serves as a valve. Then there are a lot of cartilaginous structures are there, and the cartilage is divided into the hyaline cartilage, then also the elastic cartilage. So these cartilages are also divided as thyroid cartilage and cricoid cartilages. Then the arytenoid cartilages are also two rough pyramid type of the shape. and cartilage is situated in top part of the one, and the epiglottis is the leaf-shaped fibroelastic cartilage attached to the inner surface of the wall of thyroid cartilage, and blood and nerve supply is by superior and inferior laryngeal arteries, and also the thyroid veins, then superficial laryngeal nerves are present. So these are all the muscular structure. The green structure, which is also called as the epiglottis, and this colored one, this is the thyroid cartilage. Both of these are thyroid cartilage, and the arytenoid cartilages are, these are all the arytenoid cartilages, and the yellow colored structure are the cricoid cartilages. Then the pink colored structures are called as the corniculate cartilages. Corniculate cartilages, which are not seen. So the cartilages or the epiglottis is production of the sound, speech, passage of airways, humidifying and filtering and warming the air. So the trachea, the functions are, it is called as the windpipe, and it is very much required for the continuous flow of the air inside the lung and outside lung, and length of this depends upon the type of the animal. For example, in case of human beings, it is 10 to 11 centimeter, whereas in case of the domestic animals and all, it is about a meter, whereas in giraffe, zebra, etc., it is very lengthy. And the cartilages, especially the trachea, is always a containing the alternative structures of the cartilages and intercostal muscles. This is required for the bronchoconstriction and also bronchorelaxation. Then the trachea do contain the lumen inside, wherein the water, the air flows, and the above one are C-shaped cartilage rings are present, and in between the cartilages are protected by the C-shaped rings, and esophagus lies above the cartilage. So the first organ what we can touch is the trachea, followed by the esophagus. So it's a collapsible organ, whereas this is a hollow organ. So the composition of the trachea is of the fiber elastic tissue, smooth muscles, ciliated columnar epithelium, and blood supply. As usual, the inferior thyroid artery, bronchial artery, and inferior thyroid veins are the one which drain the blood, and nerve supply is the laryngeal nerves. So the function of the trachea is to support the patency of the airway or mucociliary escalator and cuff reflex, warming, humidifying, and also filtering the air. So bronchi and bronchioles are the divisions of the trachea, and the right bronchus and the left bronchus are divided into the respective lungs, which is maybe a left lung or right lung respectively. So they are got the different structures and sizes also. So this is the structure of the tracheal cartilage or rings, then left primary bronchiole, right primary bronchiole, and the joint of left and right is called as the carina. At the level of the sternal plane it will be there. Then the cartilage plates are looking like this dotted structure, and the secondary bronchiole. Once again, this is the main division followed by the other secondary division. They are called as the secondary bronchi, and once again they are going to branch and rebranch like tertiary bronchi. Only some labeled examples are here depicted here. So usually the windpipes are lined with ciliated columnar epithelium. So they are going to divide as bronchi or bronchioles, terminal bronchioles, then respiratory bronchioles, ultimately alveolar ducts, and finally the alveoli. Air enters passing through all these routes. Then here you can see the trachea, left and right bronchioles, and it's also called as the carina between these things. Then segmental tertiary bronchi, which is shown in the blue color. Then also the subsegmental bronchi, and left and right primary bronchus is present. Then ultimately it is ending up with alveoli, and the lungs are divided into right and left lungs in most of the animals. So if you magnify the bronchiole, then alveoli, they are looking like this structure. The air flows inside, and the alveoli are surrounded by the smaller capillaries, which do contain the impure blood, and after the inhaled air is going to be dissolved in the mucus, then it's get entered into the capillaries system after it get purified, or else the carbon dioxide is left to the air, whereas the oxygen is absorbed from the air in exchange with that of the carbon dioxide. Then whenever there is a pneumonia, there is accumulation of fluid in the alveoli, and there will be cough, etc. So the ciliated columnar epithelial cells do contain the filtering mechanism of the air, so that the inhaled air should be very free from that of the dust particles, etc. So they contain the ciliated mucous membrane, and later it also got the lymph drainage system is also present. And the function of this one is control of the air entry, warming and humidifying, support and patency, removal of the particular matter, and there will be cough reflex. And the respiratory bronchioles and alveoli. So there will be about 150 million alveoli in adult human being, 150 million. And these structures are the basic structure that possess the gas exchange mechanism, and these are collapsible and expandable structure. So the exchange of gases in the lungs takes place in the final structure, that's called as the alveoli. So this is the structure of the alveoli, and you can see that each and every alveoli is surrounded by the capillary bed, may be a venule or arteriole. So the deoxygenated blood will flow in the pulmonary artery, which enters the heart later, whereas the incoming blood is always impure, which is also called as the arterioles. Then they get exchanged with that of the oxygen and carbon dioxide, then exhaled out. So this is the basic structure of the lungs, and every animal do have this type of the structures. The nerve supply is a vagus nerve. Always vagus nerve is a parasympathetic nerve, and it is going to secrete the acetylcholine, which acts on the lungs or the smooth muscles of the bronchi, and make it to constrict. And the lungs are two lungs are always present in most of the domestic animals, including the cattle, and shape is cone shape, and about weight of a adult human lung is 600 to 700 gram, whereas in case of cattle it will be more than 1.5 to 2 kgs, whereas the color of most of the lungs is pinkish in color. Then lobes are separated by the fissure. Then area between the lungs is the mediastinum, and there is a lungs, we can see that here apex, the topmost is affect. Then base structure is there, caudal surface and medial surface. Caudal surface is the down and medial structure will be there. So the right lung and left lung are interconnected by bronchiole and always take part in purifying the blood. Then coming to the structures, so there are different lobes. The upper one is the superior lobe, and the first one is called as the mid axillary line, and horizontal fissures will be present. Middle lobe, then oblique fissures are present, and inferior lobes will always be present. Hence, the cardiac notch is always having a different type of the structure because heart is the organ which will be embedded inside the lungs. Hence, they may be the protective organs of the heart, maybe also. Pleura consists of the closed sac of the serous membrane, one for each lung, which contains a small amount of the serous fluid. Then the lung is invaginated or pushed into the sac, and these form two lung layers. One is the visceral layer, and another one is the visceral pleura. So this is the adherent to the inside the chest wall and thoracic surface of the diaphragm, and pleural cavity is the one because the lungs are always covered with a very thin membrane for protection and also for the cushion effect. So it prevents the friction between the lungs during the respiratory phases, and the serous fluid is continuously secreted by epithelial cells of the membrane. So this is the right lung and left lung, then parietal pleura, visceral pleura, then left pleural artery. Arteries are a small opening present here, and mediastinum is a pinkish organ, and the right pleural cavity, in case of the cattle, it will be there. Either the right lung will be little larger than that of the left lung in case of an ox compared to the cows. So the right lung and left lung both are classified as upper, middle, or lower, and one oblique fissure may be there which separates the middle and the lower lobe. So these are all the anatomical structures: upper lobe, lower lobe, oblique fissure, middle lobe, and also cardiac compression of the cardiac notches are always present in the lungs. So the blood supply to the lungs is by the bronchial artery, pulmonary capillaries, where there is exchange of the oxygen and also the carbon dioxide take place between blood and tissues. Whereas the venous drainage is another mechanism which is present in bronchial vein, and nerve supply is by vagus nerve and cranial nerve. The function is the control of the air entry, support and patency is there, removal of the particulate matter will also be preserved. These are the important structures of the lungs, and the basic action of exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide is always called as the respiration and breathing or pulmonary ventilation. So here the gas get exchanged, it takes place inside the lungs. External respiration, which is also present, the natural air contains 17%, whereas the blood which is put out will lose about 17% of the total lung, and hence will need to be having the knowledge, especially on this particular thing. Breathing or respiration are almost same. Breathing supplies oxygen to the alveoli and eliminates carbon dioxide. That's the basic mechanism. Apart from this one, the air may also contain other debris, sometimes the toxic gas, and also the essential or non-essential matters. And intercostal muscles of the trachea and the diaphragm are responsible for the respiration. So, intercostal muscles are 12 pairs of the ribs are there in case of human beings, 11 pairs of intercostal muscles are present. And the ribs are usually helping for the way of contraction and relaxation because of the muscles attached to them to have some specific type of the receptor. So this is thoracic cavity and intercostal space is like the red one and it is consisting of a very special type of the transverse and horizontal muscles. So here you can see the innermost thing. Diaphragm is a voluntary muscle, dome-shaped muscular structure separating the thoracic and abdominal cavities. So it forms the floor of the thoracic cavity and the roof of the abdominal cavity. So the diaphragm is a muscle. When the muscle of diaphragm is relaxed, the central tendon is pulled downwards to the level of T9, thoracic 9, engaging the thoracic cavity length, enlarging. Then this decreases the pressure of the thoracic cavity and increases in abdominal and pelvic cavities. So this is the one, the diaphragm, a skeletal muscle, right crus and left crus in between the this thing, the trachea and the esophagus passes down. Usually the cycle of breathing will be different in case of different animals. The elephants do have the lower respiratory rate followed by the high respiratory rate in smaller animals. Usually in case of human being it is 12 to 15 breaths per minute. So the breath consists of three phases. One is inspiration, then expiration, and there will be a pause in between these things. Inspiration is a process of taking the air inside, and expiration is a process of putting the air outside the lung, and there will be a passive with it. And long volumes and capacities will be different for different type of the domestic animal. For example, in case of an elephant, it is very high to the extent of the tidal volume being the amount of air passing into the and out of the lungs. So, about 500 ml is the tidal volume, and the exchange of gases always take place in the lower part of the lung. And diffusion of the lungs usually happens whenever there is a respiratory problems and the carbon dioxide is the one which diffuses from venous blood from down from the heart, it is pumped out. So there are classification of internal respiration and external respiration. Internal respiration is the one where the capillaries provide the oxygen to the skeletal muscles and also the other muscles. and blood arriving at tissues has been cleansed of its carbon dioxide saturated with oxygen during its passage through the lungs. Therefore, it has a higher oxygen and oxygen carbon dioxide levels. So these are all the things. Oxygen is carried in the blood as combination with that of the hemoglobin and is called as the oxyhemoglobin, and carbon dioxide is also carried out by the hemoglobin and it's called as the carbaminohemoglobin. And control of respiration is by the medulla oblongata or the respiratory center which is located in medulla oblongata. Then the disorders of the respiratory tract, lot of disorders are there, especially the asthma, where in which the bronchiole is inflamed, and it's a common long-term inflammatory disease of the airways of the lungs, but the asthma is psychosomatic in nature most of the time, which is not a common feature in case of the domestic animals. And you can see that normal this trachea do contain the wide space, whereas the asthma, the walls are being enlarged. Inflammation of the bronchial tubule will be there, and these are the healthy alveoli, and the in pulmonary emphysema, the lung condition is caused shortness of the breath in the people with emphysema. The air sacs in the lungs are damaged. Then pneumonia is a process in which the inflammation of the lungs and the bronchioles. So normal lungs are looking like this with the normal architecture and the bronchioles. Whereas in case of the pneumonia, the fluid is filled in alveoli and also the thickening up of the walls of the trachea takes place. So, the pneumonia is an inflammatory condition of the lung affecting primarily the small air sacs known as the alveoli. Pneumonia. In general, the inflammation of lung is called as the pneumonia. Then lung abscesses may also be present in case of many of the domestic animal, and a lot of the pulmonary disorders are also present like the hemorrhagic septicemia, the bacterial diseases, viral diseases. During the COVID-19 also many might have seen that the lungs were inflamed to the greatest extent, and sometimes the lungs get collapsed when air escapes from the lungs. The air then fills the space outside the lung between the lung and chest wall. So the collapsed lung will look like this, and air in lung sac will be present. And apnea is total absence of the respiration. Then during apnea, there is no movement of the muscles of the inhalation, and volume of the lungs initially remain unchanged. So this is the normal breathing of a human being, and blocked airways always make it very difficult in breathing. And sleep apnea is the one. And lung tumors are also located in some part of the lung like carcinorous mass or cancerous mass. And lymphoid spread will be present throughout this thing. And it may be present at any type of the lungs. That's about the thing, and thanks a lot for patient hearing. Bye.